although the Lam Rim Chenmo book, Lam Rim book, I think available, but I brought with me is it this my own personal sort of Lam Rim Chenmo, because this text, 17th March 1959, when I left Nobulinga that night, this book I brought with me.
Your Holiness, in American culture, for many people, it is considered disgraceful or unacceptable to show weakness, to show pain, or to show need.
그렇다.
리치도도 단체는 미망부지기 수수 강해여보다 아니 아직 나자다 직세면에 여보다나 미션달 때야데 양지 unacceptable 시고레스 야고 멤버지.
강해 시고레스.
디현 때야데.
현때는 야고레스.
야고 멤버지 문제 시고레스 야고 많이 버지 문제.
알레.
How can one show compassion by helping someone who is unwilling to admit their pain or need by asking for help? That the day really are. Nishandagun Ningjiton, Roboche, Tapshekarinas.
I don't know. I think better to ask some experts. Maybe they have some sort of ideas. I don't know.
How is it possible to maintain the practice of non-grasping when grieving the death of someone that you love, especially when it is a sudden death and one is in great shock?
No, that did overall view genre.
So in many instances like this, a lot depend on what kind of overall outlook on life that you have. And this is in fact where perspectives like the illusion-like understanding of nature of reality really will have an impact.
That day and Jumzen Dembe Zawa, Jumzen Dembe Zewe, that gigantic grass for store. The structure dog. That change log, that change log, that Denzingi, Gipigeta, Jade of Salmon. Denzin the Jade, grasping Zimberlotti, Chungtang. Jumzen de Benazawa, but Chanju Sembe, Rang saw later, Zell Zimbe, the Utalia. They get 7 money, they change each other the door. The warrior. Did it? Tamashian, the Ningilia, Numu Jengi Ningi said in the Sumi Yungi. So Numu Jengi Ningi, Numu Jengi Tava Young Choice. Yang Shung Kashanala, Tava Gawari, tell Denzin the Tundi, who Maris and Sung in the Yonti. Tang around the Lord to shut down the Chavina. She damning call meeting, the Jiggy, but the Shishavali, Ming, Paget density, and the Jiggy. Jidan, as I tell us all Chawachaslo and Shinchani, the Jimmy. Don't tell it, they should do. Tava, Denzin Day Tang, Denzin Tada, Nimdolian to think Tava, you show something. So that the Yacha the big hot 때는 때 되니 본디 닝제 쇼지 딱게 달래야 가소래 로 냐와디 먼저다 묘문ችን 차별로 냐와다 가보다고 세처럼 생기 따이네 그 시제 로티 쿠르루티 만다시도.
So here, I think it is important to make a distinction between forms of grasping, if one can use that word. For example, when someone generates a strong compassion in the face of a suffering sentient being, and in that instance, the person who is experiencing this great compassion for the suffering sentient being, there is a genuine form of attachment, focus, and engagement with the object of that compassion. So that kind of attachment and engagement and turning towards or holding that object it's not a distorted form of grasping, and it's not a form of grasping that one needs to get rid of. The form of grasping that one needs to get rid of is a form of grasping that is grounded upon some form of falsification of the object, which involves an element of distortion, such as afflictions and so on, particularly grasping at the substantial existence of the object. So, therefore, in some text, some texts say that mental states such as compassion and faith, they are by their very nature virtuous qualities. Therefore, they cannot be simultaneous to an afflicted state of mind. However, some other texts even speak of afflicted compassion or afflicted faith. So, regardless of whatever it may be, so for example, in our case, those who do not have the realization of emptiness, when we generate a strong devotion towards the Buddha, maybe it is possible in that, faith, that strong devotion we feel for the Buddha, there may be an element of grasping at the substantial reality or existence of the Buddha. So that is a form of afflicted devotion. However, it is important to make the distinction that the form of grasping that one needs to avoid is really the grasping that is rooted in some form of falsification and distorted perception. It's not the kind of attachment or focus or holding that experiences like compassion generates. So although experientially these two forms of grasping may feel like the same, phenomenologically speaking they are the same, but in terms of the overall environment within the mind, they are quite different. In one case, in the case of compassion, there is a more sound basis. In the case of a distorted grasping, there is no sound basis. So that phenomenologically, they may be experiences similar, but the mental environment are very different.
So it seems there's some understanding about absence of independent existence that may not directly sort of effect on our destructive emotion. But gradually, that understanding is gradually changing our whole attitude towards, I think, external object as well as internal object. So through that way, gradually, these destructive emotions then reduce, or at least in their intensity reduce. The positive or constructive emotion still has a further
enhanced.
다 소소소 다 감도 매배 캬바 원부터 되게 캬바를 여쭈냐.
There might also be differences in the based on different individuals depending upon their own physical constitution, mental state, and so on.
Next question.
Your Holiness, I feel agitated to see and hear the Shukden protesters outside. How do I help myself? And also please address this issue as many are misinformed.
Konso misinformed je셨어요.
Marmangbuchi, mimangbuchi misinformed those.
That can't help. Actually, this is a problem. Now last, I think 370 years. So still, that problem remains. During 5th Dalai Lama, this problem started. So actually, from 1951 till early 70, I myself also one of the worshippers of this spirit. So, actually, previously, I also one of them. Then around early 70, of course, I'm not going to detail. You will boring. Actually, you see, there are different sort of method to investigate, and also reading the autobiography of the past sort of many great lamas, or mainly great lamas of Yellowhead sect. Suppose if this Shungden is something truly reliable, then most of these great lama after 5th Dalai Lama, I think must be
Practitioners.
Practice. That's not the case. So I developed some doubt. Then thorough investigation. Then it became clear. And one sort of Tsongkhapa chimbe sungsil tiduga di ngor de conditions la tamin tamju chakpa genzen shi melon lobe tamsin jungbun di dan dan ro kon la chechen na gunju pungni ma ja tawa los tawa sik digi ngoi chaba mare dui chaba ngoi chaba chele chaba sumshik duga melon lobe sa di dui chaba ngoi chaba tamsin jungbu sa di ngoi chaba dan dan ro kon la chechen na chawa chaba sa di chele chaba.
So, for example, in one of 5th Dalai Lama's writings, he very explicitly explains his position vis-a-vis this spirit worship and identifies what it is and what were the causes and conditions giving rise to the arising of this, and what are the functions, the destructive functions of this particular spirit. And he identifies the condition from which it arose as a form of false aspiration or distorted aspiration, or and then the nature itself as a spirit that manifests in the form of a violator of a pledge, and then the function this 5th Dalai Lama identifies is bringing about harm for both the Buddhist doctrine and beings, sentient beings.
So then, it is my moral responsibility to make clear what is the reality. And whether listen or not, entirely up to individual. So right from the beginning, I told Tibetan and as well as some of our friends this sort of story, but whether to listen my advice or not, up to them. It is free. Whether accept religion or not, individual right. Whether you accept this religion or that religion, of the individual. This is actually not a religion, simply spirit worshipper. So then another sort of consequences is, another aspect of this problem is Tibetan Buddhism, as I think many of you already noticed, the pure lineage of Nalanda tradition. So due to some of Tibetan sort of, because of the practice or behavior, this profound, rich tradition eventually becomes something spirit worshipper. It's very sad. And then secondly, I think all you know, as my effort is promotion of non-sectarian. And particularly within Tibetan Buddhist tradition, I always give encouragement to receive teaching from
Teachers, lamas.
Teachers of different traditions, like 15th Dalai Lama, and many sort of past great lamas. They receive teaching from different traditions. So my own case, in early 70, or I think late 60s, then I still practice this. Then I already started receiving teaching from Lam Rim Chenmo, like Shantadeva's or a text like that already. Then he very much non-sectarian. He received many teaching from many different traditions. So I want to receive one teaching, Nyingma tradition, Nyingma sort of teaching from him. Then firstly, I asked Lingam Che, since I already received some teaching from him, so now I want to receive, that's the Gyu Sawa Nyingma, the Nyingma sort of one important text, Gyu Sawa Nyingma. Then Lingam Che a little bit cautious because of this spirit. Although Lingam Che is never sort of worship this, he himself very sort of cautious about this spirit. Not like Trijang Che. Trijang Che very much sort of close this spirit. However, Lingam Che, because the story, one Gelug Lama received teaching from Nyingma tradition, then this spirit will destroy you. So Lingam Che a little bit because of the scare. So Lingam Che advised me, be careful. He told me like that. So failed to receive teaching from him. So the practice or follower of that Shungden worshipper, they have this sort of tradition, must be very strict, one's own sort of Gelug tradition, like that. So
So in actuality, that kind of standpoint deprives you of the freedom of religion, not to be able to receive other teachings.
Mm-hmm. So Chöda Rangmen Mayoya di Tamra Chayade, Chöda Rangmen Sungjo Chayade. What is it?
So in actual practice, to restrict a form of standpoint that deprives one the freedom to choose is a form of affirmation of the freedom, because the double negation is an affirmation.
So that's quite complicated, like that. Now, so in any way, that's a second reason. Then third reason, of course, since since
Fifth.
15th Dalai Lama, and 13th Dalai Lama also very, very sort of
Critical.
serious about this sort of spirit, like that. So logically, I'm supposed reincarnation of 15th Dalai Lama and the 13th Dalai Lama. So I have to follow their line. I think in order to prove myself as a true reincarnation. So in any way, these people, they really, I think, fund worship the spirit. Then okay, they are right, no problem. Only my worry in Germany, again, you see some group of Shungden followers, I think at least 3-4 hours shouting. So then eventually I felt a little sort of concern about their throat. Too much shouting. Like that.
Your Holiness, what single act could each of us do to help the people of Tibet in the long run and in the short term? 말해. 뱀이 쫄이야.
가.
뱀이 쫄래 가지고 대여버 저 미케르키 돈에 게르기레레 미레레 돈에
봐봐.
봐봐 쫄어.
아니 뱀이 있어.
뱀이.
가지고
봐봐. Now, people of Tibet
sound like 뱀이, not 뱀이. So 뱀이 means Tibetan. 뱀이 means female. So I confused. 진짜 배워줘라 그랬어 어제.
라레. 태당 푸네.
가.
태당 푸네 폐야래야. 네 배워줘라.
태당 풀 폐야. Now I think immediate one important thing is, unfortunately, since 10th March crisis had, because of Chinese government propaganda, many innocent Chinese now get the feeling Tibetans are anti-Chinese. So there's too much emotion. My last visit to America, I had actually some Chinese demonstrations. So then finally, I want to meet some of them. And I think seven of them I met. Too much emotion. Except 2 persons, you see, they calmly listen about my sort of explanation. But the rest of them, no interest to listen. It's my explanation. Too much emotion, like that. So at that time also, I suggested, now the time has come to set up a friendship group, Tibetan and Han Chinese, wherever they live, their community there, set up one friendship group. And then make known each other so that when some problem, happen, then they can discuss, they can exchange. Otherwise, usually no communication, remain isolated. Then something happened, too much emotion. So you can help. Wherever some Tibetans and Han Chinese there, help them to create one sort of friendship group, and you also can join. It's with sort of sincere motivation. Now, after all, the Tibetan problem have to solve between Han Chinese and Tibetan. No one else. I always was telling my Chinese sort of friend and also the Western sort of supporters, 2 hands, right hand suppose more important. So this right hand extended towards Chinese government. And so long this right hand remain empty, then logically there are people who are willing to help us, who really showing concerns. So naturally, our left hand extend to them. As soon as right hand gets some concrete sort of result, then left hand will withdraw and say goodbye. So like that. So therefore, among the Chinese brothers sisters, fuller awareness about Tibetan problem is very, very essential. So whenever you have some opportunity, tell them about Tibetan culture, about Tibetan language, about Tibetan spirituality. It's helpful. Then also, sometimes, I think helpful to tell the history, Tibetan view, Chinese view, and even among Chinese also, there are different views about past history. Not all agree the Chinese official sort of view, official version. So that's very important, that in order to develop in order to carry realistic approach, fuller knowledge about the reality is very essential. So in that respect, I think many of you usually can help. Yeah, like that.
Your Holiness, as a beginner on the path, still taking just baby steps, do you have any words to help me establish a meaningful daily practice that will lead me forward to greater awareness and understanding?
I have to read more. Nowadays, translation in English, also some other language, like French or German, and Portuguese, I think Spanish. And of course Chinese, although I think fewer than English, isn't it? I think new translation. I think English, I think much more. So in any way, read more. Then in daily, at least 1 hour or half an hour, think about inward, inner word,
No, inner word.
and contemplation.
Contemplate.
Those points which you learned through reading, and more examine, more sort of investigation, and some kind of comparison, what text says and what your usual sort of way of thinking and way of life. Comparison, right? That's the way. I think time in morning better. Your mind fresh. Maybe after breakfast even better. Or at least for me like that. So before breakfast, still hungry, so sometimes even meditate, half mind go stomach. So like that. So that's the way. Because of that, the diminishing ceremony, because she do some research, so she, but a lot of chair, and this will all in the judo the jar, those channel, the person also Yamatra chapter.
So this kind of approach by studying and then trying to take what you have understood as a basis of your contemplation, spending some time in a more formal way, and this is a kind of a combination of understanding, study and meditative practice. So in a sense, that kind of approach will become a combination of the approach of learning, critical reflection, and meditation.
Yeah, that's one. Tao Changi Sadi. I think it's there, Dodo Gonjine, Changi do Munzidang, and a Jiction. Diane, Lord Missive Donor, young Changi Chidang, Jixon Yari. Now, the Manda, Dorang, the Manda Song you into Zane, that the EMG Doyati. 다 돈이 한다보다 장년조다 돈이 맨날 총송아 다 녹화 샤샤오래 양도 현실 된 거잖아 얘네 통미도 자료도 와 또 좀 된데 셰슈 여러 저는 다 장구도 송다시네 다 쉬죠로다
So
디비드 다 돌때 여마래 엔 통미도 자료야 근데 이미 있으면 다 일본 일을 때는 장년초래 근데 인도 루주고 그래서 사도 제대 다 자야지 들으셔. 그래서 그래 민디 배인조로와 리베서 추세네. 리베 장장 타네 고 제대하지 위드잖아요. 리소소도.
So we were talking about, now to return to the text, we were talking about the need to differentiate between what is a definitive sutra and what is a non-definitive sutra. And I pointed out that even within the Buddha's own sutras, there are different criteria that explains what constitutes a definitive sutra and what constitutes a non-definitive sutra. For example, in Samti Nirmochana, Sutra Unraveling the Intent of the Buddha, there was one interpretation explained as kind of a criteria of determining this. Similarly, we also find another sutra, Akshamaya Nirdesha Sutra. In that, Buddha presents another criteria of determining what constitutes definitive and what constitutes non-definitive. So what this suggests is that if we were to rely on sutra alone, scripture alone, to determine what is a definitive and what is a non-definitive, then the question arises which sutra to base it on. And in order to prove that sutra to be definitive, then you would need another sutra to establish that, and so on. So the process will become infinite. So therefore, of course, if the Buddha were to be alive today, we can go back to him and say, can you please tell us which one is really the true one? Which is, of course, we don't have that recourse. So therefore, the only way in which we can determine what is a definitive and what is a non-definitive is really by applying critical analysis. And that's also the reason why Master Nagarjuna composed the great treatises, such as the collection, 6 collections of his analytic corpus. And in fact, the expression that the collective name given to those 6 works, which is Rikcho, analytic collection or analytic corpus, is really beautiful because it emphasizes the role of reason and critical analysis.
자, 드린이들은 좀 되는 게 아니 그런다 캐나지 세세는 레버다라 가야가 라운샤 귀신 민신이 소스 잡아지 당세시 아니 다 타져버리스 롱을 겹수지 겨만 송도와.
So therefore, the Buddha himself states in the sutra, O monks and the learned ones, do not accept my words just out of reverence or because I say so, but just as the goldsmith would examine the quality of a gold by subjecting it to a rigorous process, in the same manner you should subject my words, and on that basis of your own understanding, you should accept their validity. So what the Buddha is pointing out is that one should not accept the scriptures or sutras on the basis of their face value, but rather one should relate what is said with relation, to one's own understanding, and on the basis of that understanding, one should accept their validity.
아 자쇼 나리야 자쇼 라지 수십에 나리야 지금만 에 우모발이야 다 차다와래 신수 견주 제셔봐 다디 랜드 고루루 봐 견유도 산에 고대 아니 케이지니 저번에 데이터 데라 저번에 데이니 동리주 가봐 동리주 모 동리주 터 디드 마시베 견레스 저 도송도 디도 내가 통계 다 동리주 가봐 산데 동번이 고매하게 동리 땅을 보여야 가봐대 친주로 나와 친주로 로 다디 다야 된다 이 말이야 가봐대 자 나고 산제베 두더마 상월로게 다도 짐바 세야디 견다 견리야 문지 다 참을 나대요 자 디리인데 배로 차샤나 강사가 다음에 좀 때는 파 아직 가서 나면 rakbar다 가다 가서 안 주트에 제일 동에 다음에 대성시 때는 판네 대성시 관배 날 진배 지금 직도 rak바 수부지 그렇다 직도 rak바 대줄 차이디 단대 수충 죽었다 이내에 풍불이야 다 다하게 풍부성 다그 손에 차네 다 지켜봐야 어떤 민의 시야들이 변시 뭐부지 뭐 이동하러 지 소수 다그 먹송콩을 뭐부터는 지를 진단으로 됐다 르 현자시단 됐다 뭐부터 다그 송차를 제라 현자시단 이부터 개도가 저서 되게 다그 송에게 다게 진짜 가지 숙셔요 저기 뒤롱 제제 최대들이 진짜 차이야 다도 진짜 숙충으로는 다그 롱 제제 최대들이야 다그 제야 최대들 현자 총자 특별히 잡아 연구를 돼 이내 거로 풍속 쇼커라 지 아택 진짜지 그 터도 다 최대하면 되겠니 아니 다 송진이동기 다 최다음에 송유를 자네 실존주의 하마리스 당연히 안다 그런 숙적을 써와 라랑 진배 독배 신실 숙적을 써고 대다게 전진면에 주었다고 싶는 게 아래 전진면에 주었다고 나오는지 전진면에 주었다고 진이 용도 다들 최단세 시작해 다 전진면에 주스로도 팔면에 링이 샤다버는 신지기 다 팔면에 여대버지기 고 가서 우리 진대 체류전에 실전으로 좀 뭐지 얘기도 하대. 그래서 어디 대화 말해서 막 가셔도잖아요. 숙적을 속에 최대의 나왔다도 믿음으로 다 전진면에 여버는지 다가도 팔면에 여버는 신지기 나오는 신 여말에 삼는 즉 통윤도 전에 방문의 여버디 땀발진 대왕의 현자게 돼야지 배진용을 주래 처음에 받아요 레디네 대 더동 난게 시베 땡게 초와 대도를 차단돼야라 편서 말와 그래서 시베 등주진데 거 알아 지난 치dun갑에 니동기 대코는 이 대콤배 시베 땡게 아니 대도리야 차단돼야라 편서 말와 캐시도 다되네 우모베 최탐제 단동 규모도부 전 치던 난게 야메 버전 치소 난즈버 탐제로 된 담버들로 또래 전 숨비야레 레디이네다 난세기 런시 여벌마와다 런시 매버마와스니 우모베 나왔다 이 체인도 전에 다 런시 여벌마와 디디 디디 떠주디 팔문에 여대버지 문지샤로다. 전쟁원에 여버지 문지시도. 자, 전쟁원에 여버지 문지나 인도자네 론놈을 능주 된지 뭐지 근데速度 샤용도 와 와다 론놈을 나 관계 아니 르다 더 좋지 나 샤오면 요런 도움이 들으지면 저배도 또네 이네 로로 능주 된지 들으 인루지 예되지 전제식에 따라 때라 즈버도와 아테는 즈버 영서로 그 밑에도와 밑에 하도와 봐 다른 시 매번 말에 갈수 것을 있나 판문이 주어지 주는 야마레스 다 민대 시작선 지레스 러비운데 그게 대단 대사로 그게 지 가서 우리 그게 로티 그게 댄서로 로티 그게 지 시샤서로 지기 밑에 싸우는 식으로 자 대응업의 내수를 사샤네 그 대응은 저것이 야나 출 런주베 때는 따고도 숨겨야 돼 이네 대응은 저것이 샤나 때는 따고 되면 누가 그 때는 따고 멤버 때는 저 멤버십 뭐이나 아니 그 템퍼처를 동아리스 럽신 럼네 그러셔서 뭐 텐지 템퍼처도 사실은 인도산에 다도 상당 자용은 강사다면 되는데 직상금도 최이다면 니동수이다면 되는데 직상금도 오늘은 주베 탄예도 랑선시 칸라네 아니 탄탄바 뭐니 담바 못 줘서 송샤다 뒤에 차 상식 배웠어도 봐. 세상 공부를 주게 한다. 내세 섬단 대발은 너무 도시 지미 중 스타들이 밑대지 하라이는 태민의 차단 창문 디그리스. 그래서 밑대 자원의 시과지. 자, 들이켜서 보는 퀀텀 톤의 시야윤데 그 나무이는 그 오브젝티브 피깅 면에 즉 템퍼러 즉 여대로 즉다 시샤체 돼야지. 다 관점 세력 시에 있는 자네 다 로이 그게 가서 로이 왕게 이해버렸디 더 차이도 다이네 아도 오마베다 르 왕게시 어디 조심해 봐 말해 르 왕게 마샤베 쳐요 말할 때르 강샤요 말해 했어야지 똑바로 강소소이 말봐 똑바로 강소소 시에 있는 제대로 주고 그래 다도 관점당 뒤도서 강해면서 똑바로 왕게 조지 그로지 소탁이지 다도 왕게 예버지 왜미지 주의 것도 봐 방문되면 다이는 똑바로 강소소이 말하다 똑바로 강샤 예면 그거지 다 뒤참여 쳐야지 오면 나와 가서다 디가 내는 거야 그래
in understanding the way in which the teaching on the no self and emptiness is presented here, one thing that is very beneficial is to look at Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom of the middle way, particularly in chapter 24, where in response to the objections raised by the Buddhist essentialists who have charged Nagarjuna's position to be a form of nihilism, implying the rejection of all the law of cause and effect and so on. And Nagarjuna opens his rebuttal of these objections by stating that the reason why you are leveling against me all of these nihilistic charges is because you have failed to understand the purpose of the teaching on emptiness. What is emptiness? You have failed to understand the emptiness itself, and also and the meaning of the term emptiness. So I think this is a very significant point that Nagarjuna is raising. So in explaining what is the purpose of the teaching of emptiness, Nagarjuna points out that the purpose of teaching of emptiness is to help eliminate all the distorted perceptions, distorted states of mind. And generally speaking, all the Buddhist schools share the consensus that grasping at self, is a form of fundamental distortion. And so although all the Buddhist schools share this as a consensus, however, the way in which the understanding of no-self is characterized has different implications. For example, certain types of Buddhist schools understand the no-self or anatman in terms of the absence of a substantially real existing person as possessing self-sufficient substantial reality, and based on that, if one cultivates the wisdom, realizing that degree of no-self, although that realization will definitely have an impact upon reducing grasping, at least the gross levels of grasping to one's own sense of self. However, because it does not relate to the grasping at the basis of the self, which are the aggregates, so therefore there's still a room is left for grasping, because as explained before, when you have grasping at the basis of the self, the aggregates, then the sense of possession of these aggregates as being one's own arises. And when you have that kind of notion of mind with the grasping, then of course grasping arises as well. So I normally point out the difference, the qualitative difference between the way in which we relate to objects, something that we find attractive. So before we buy that object, when it's displayed in a shop, you may feel attached to it, but that quality of that attachment is very different from after you have bought that object, and now you have labeled it as yours, and you start relating to that object as yours. And from that point onwards, the degree to which you feel attached to it, and how that attachment is tied to your own identity and possession is very different from, although it may be the same object, but the quality of the attachment you have towards that object is very different. So this shows that so long as there is some basis to identify something as mine with the grasping, then of course grasping itself arises. So, therefore, the realization of no self only in relation to the person as devoid of self-sufficient substantial existence is not adequate. So therefore, we find in the Buddhist teachings not just a notion of no self of person, but also no self of phenomena, selflessness of phenomena. And here, within the schools that present this, there is one school, for example, the mind-only school, where the selflessness of phenomena is understood in terms of the absence of subject-object duality. And here, here, the understanding is that when we relate to objects and we see that object as true reference of the term that we apply to this object, and we act as if this particular object exists as the referent of that term, somehow objectively by means of its own characteristics. So therefore, by dismantling the solidity of this external reality and meditating upon this, it is possible that one's grasping at external things may reduce, because you are dismantling the notion of a solid object which is independent out there. And once you do that, of course, it is going to have an effect on your own grasping at these objects. The grasping will be reduced. However, so long as that analysis is not applied to one's own internal states, such as sensations, feelings, and mental states, then there will still be some room, basis for grasping. Or you may not grasp so obviously to the external objects, but you will grasp at your own internal states, your sensations, feelings, and so on. So therefore, particularly with relation to the sensations and so on. So therefore, we find the Madhyamaka approach, the middle way school approach, where not just external material objects, but across the entire spectrum of phenomena, the idea of substantial reality is negated. So therefore, the presentation is made of the absence of true existence of all phenomena, both internal and external. And within this school of middle way, there are two principal understanding of emptiness. One that still presupposes some notion of objectivity to things. And here, a notion of an inherent nature is accepted. Say, for example, the Madhyamaka Svatrantika. So here, although they do accept the notion of emptiness, but since there is a supposition that although phenomena exist in relation to our perception, however, there is a mode of being that can appear to the mind, an undistorted mind. And so this kind of notion assumes there being some kind of objective nature to things. And now, in contrast, the other Madhyamakas reject, even on the conventional level, this notion of objective reality. And so the problem with the earlier Madhyamakas, or the first Madhyamaka view, is that even then there is still some basis left for grasping, because there is a degree of objective reality that is maintained. So there is a basis to grasp at, there is a basis to hold on to. And here, Nagarjuna points out in the 60 verses, where he says that in a mind that still holds on to a locus, why is it not the case that the poisons of the mind will arise in it? So, and therefore, the second group of Madhyamaka, the middle way masters, reject the notion of objective inherent existence, even on a conventional level. So in this way, they dismantle any basis for objectification. So there is no ground left, there is no basis left, there is no object left that can be grasped at or objectified. And it is this. So if you compare all of these different explanations of the teaching on no self and critically reflect upon them, then you can see that progressively they do lead to this subtle understanding where in the final analysis nothing must be left as a ground to grasp onto, to hold on to. And in a way, we see a kind of a parallel, kind of a parallel in the quantum world. Before, in the classical model of physics, there was an assumption of objects as possessing kind of self-defined reality. However, in the light of quantum discoveries, increasingly that kind of classical model of supposing objectivity is becoming difficult to maintain. And so there is an understanding that even the notion of reality needs to incorporate some perspective of the perception, some role of the perception. However, in the quantum world, I noticed that because of this difficulty of grounding reality of the things in an objective manner, they are also finding it very difficult to even articulate what reality is. So in the Madhyamaka, when the Madhyamaka Prasangikas say that there is no objective ground or basis for the reality, and then all phenomena are dependently originated, and all phenomena exist by only, they are real only in terms of language, terms and designation. They are not saying that anything goes, that it's not the case that you can imagine something and that is real. There is, and this is where I feel that quantum physics is finding a difficulty in trying to incorporate the insights, but also at the same time maintain the notion of reality. And therefore, even for the Madhyamaka, the middle way philosophers, the crux of the challenge really is how to maintain that middle way, the balance, while rejecting totally any notion of objective intrinsic reality, yet at the same time according a robust reality to things. And maintaining that middle way is really the challenge. So therefore, if you examine all the various explanations of the teaching on no self that we delineated, the earlier ones, when you critically examine them, somehow you feel that there is something not complete here, there is something lacking here, that somehow they feel doesn't seem completely right. And then progressively as you move on, you culminate in the understanding of the Madhyamaka Prasangika, where the notion of intrinsic existence is rejected, entirely. Then the statement that all phenomena are devoid of inherent existence, and then that realization, that standpoint, we will come to recognize that this is complete, this is final, there is no contradiction involved here.
The Buddha Dalai Chesutang, any Shivala, Arianda Kaza, the Dawachawa, did the same diction. Dial Ludugi, General, any Babika, Lubbing Digi, and the Lubber Ishinimbo. And correct, can she was a Kamalashi, Didi, Tanya say shaking, descent ship. Tin Nansigi, Tini Nalaya, any Lovelendea said, she didn't shave. Any Kajishi was a Yapsagi, she didn't miss shiva. Something down the temple. What is Sumiyari? That come to dialogue to Zori. Then thou showed me. That Shimeva Mount, the Zos that did look to that, look Tambalzini, and the Chevrolet, that Handong, Dao Danapur, the Dishishari.
So then Tsongkhapa explains historically the various interpretations of Nagarjuna's teachings that evolved in India. So within the Madhyamaka tradition in the Indian context, they evolved Nagarjuna's own disciple, immediate disciple, Aryadeva, and the disciples and the interpreters of commentators on Nagarjuna include Buddha Palita and those who follow Buddha Palita's reading include Chandrakirti and Shantideva. And then they evolved another line of interpretation coming from Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, stemming from Bhava Viveka, and from Bhava Viveka, Gyanagarbha and Shantarashita and his student Kamalashila. So you have two main strands of interpretation of Nagarjuna's writings. And within the group that come from Bhava Viveka, there were again internally two subdivisions. One which accept the notion of external reality, and one which reject the external reality and follow more in line with the mind-only school standpoint. So you have Bhavaviveka himself and Jnanagarbha belonging to the first group, and Shantarakshita and Kamalashila taking more of a mind-only type standpoint. And here in this text, Tsongkhapa presents principally the standpoint of Chandrakirti, the standpoint that rejects the notion of intrinsic existence, even on a conventional level. So, in the case of Tibetan tradition, whether it is the early translation school of Nyingma, or whether it is the Mahamudra teachings, the Great Seal teachings of Kagyu school, or whether it is the union of clarity and emptiness teachings of Sakya school, or whether it is that of the Gelug tradition, all of these four major schools really present their view of understanding of emptiness from the point of view of Prasangika tradition, Prasangika standpoint.
Shandong Uma Chenmo Suzanaya, Shandong Uma Chenmo Zibanaya, Rikashagan, Sunda, the Tembu Mendachi, and Sanjay Janda, Dawatawini, Kobadi, Gomulu, Gomon Chaya Mares, and the Sumichi. Gomulu, the Tommy, and much that Thomas no Road, Reta, Kana Gomachik to me. Chamogombe, Gulamatang, Gomulu, and Chin Deva, and our Shire, said the English and Totu Dawa Delishin. They were Shanto Umachambos, and the Otavada, Sanjay Jani, and Jadados, Metacharis, the Swiss store.
So, within the Tibetan tradition, we have the Shantong standpoint that upholds the teaching of the great middle way, and within that school, there are some masters who maintain that the interpretation of Nagarjuna presented by or propounded by Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti are unacceptable, and in fact they present the convergence of the standpoint of Nagarjuna and Asanga, and particularly pointing out that Nagarjuna's hymns to the ultimate expanse as really representing the final standpoint of Nagarjuna's thought. And of course, the content of the teachings in the hymns to the ultimate expanse is very similar to the sublime continuum teaching of Maitreya, the Uttara Tantra.
That's Sunda Chemu Medayore, Tanya Joda Chemu Medayore. The Benjalos Shaying Swan, the Benjamin Temperisha. That Nedu Luri location, Nyamyon Shanyan, Nanjobe, Jano Kopachu to publish on that Tempery.
So, of course, if you look at the writings of these great masters, there is a differences in the terminology they use, the approaches they present, and so on. However, when it comes to the final understanding, I think what Panchen Lama Losang Chögyен states in his root lines on Mahamudra, the Great Seal, where he says that, in relation to all of these diverse teachings, if someone learned in the definitive teachings and application of the reasoning, and combined with yogic practices, yoga realizations, with deep experience, then all of the teachings really converge on the final point. However, we do need to bear in mind that both in the context of the teachings of the Tibetan masters as well as Indian masters, that one needs to distinguish between two principal approaches of a text. One which may be, which is presented specific in relation to an individual, specific individuals' approach, and another approach where the presentation is made from the point of view of overall, Dharma teaching.
단데네 다수버 동리 다 달람베 추샤가라 데코나니를 주베 르바당 데코나니 달라 뭐소스 다 데코나니를 주베 르바자가 데코나니 소야데 자오시르고 최준하리야 가오면 좀 샤와다 뭐 타자되면 저번 일시 사다 데코나니.
So then, the third outline, the way in which the view of emptiness is presented, this is explained under two main headlines. The stages by which one enters into the understanding of the suchness, and the actual presentation of the suchness. So here, when Tsongkhapa is talking about stages by which one enters into suchness, we need to understand what is meant by suchness, tattvata. And here, it is helpful to look at Nagarjuna's own salutation verse in the Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, where he characterizes the ultimate reality as total calming of conceptual elaboration, total pacification of conceptual elaboration.
다가한다다 lam rim chenmo 되도가 진대식 권에 가서데 늘 톱을 쳐야 데코나니 양알랜다 말이 강해 톱을 쳐야 데코나니를 주고는 진대식 권에 주고 냠나 치다난 게최 나서 데코나 뭐인신도 데코나니도 나와 뒤터져 파자다 잡은 여러 시에 다도 다긴 좀 나바 탐제도 사바니 늘 톱을 쳐야 데코나니 추기고
So, in identifying what is the suchness that one, needs to enter into its understanding, Tsongkhapa writes in the following. This is in chapter 9, page 119, second para. So, he opens with a question. Nirvana is the reality one seeks to attain. But what is nirvana? If entry into reality means a method for attaining it, then how do you enter? And then in response he writes, the reality that you seek to attain, the embodiment of truth, is the total extinction of conceptualization of both self and that which belongs to the self, specifically by stopping all the various internal and external phenomena from appearing as though they were reality itself, which they are not, along with the latent predispositions for such false appearances. So, the nirvana being referred to here is the non-abiding nirvana.
Tene tiku malona medogo tone koya zawa keng yamde te zawa zai jebe jigzang mari wo koya zawa rulu la ngeba ting tagwa ne zhone te pongwan de deba chuma ma yinba jik geba go tene jigza dogo te te sume da mewa dogbe shir gewa la ra lewa tone da te ga gobo tongde da te yeba la neje da mebe chubshi ki lungda zibo la tene never 즉 탈바 턴도 년나 매베터 매도 배지 되게 다디 양대랑 자야 양대를 자기로샤 다디 샴디 데코는 추주고 오서데 양대 파자다 잡아 지도와 나와지 선자 파자다 잡아 사야지 순전에 추주고 세 미네베 양대세 다디 양대 질이 있어요.
So then Tsongkhapa writes in the following on the same page. The stages by which you enter the reality are as follows. First, having contemplated in dismay the faults and disadvantages of cyclic existence, you should develop a wish to be done with it. Then, understanding that you will not overcome it unless you overcome its cause, you research its roots, considering what might be the root cause of cyclic existence, You will thereby become certain from the depths of your heart that the rarefying view of the perishing aggregates or ignorance acts as the root of cyclic existence. You then need to develop a sincere wish to eliminate that. Next, see that overcoming the rarefying view of the perishing aggregates depends upon developing the wisdom that knows that the self, as thus conceived, does not exist. You will then see that you have to refute that self. Be certain in that refutation, relying upon scriptures and lines of reasoning that contradict its existence and prove its non-existence. This is an indispensable technique for anyone who seeks liberation.
Yeah.
So these explanations are really based upon Chandrakirti's clear words, Prashanapada.
Dan dikabli kansa ga dame da chöyi dame de ani anda röji yaba mawa da umaba kada röji bane ma sonji gi kansa ga dame da chöyi dame yela ani chara shugo yare da anda kamde kansa ga dame chöyi dame de dongshi kyabar ma do dame ngol chara me se song de.
So here one thing that is made very clear is that between selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of person, there is no differences in degree of subtlety of what is being negated between these two selflessnesses. Other Madhyamaka school that adhere to some notion of inherent existence, for them there is a difference between what is being negated in the context of selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of person.
Yeah. 로죽 롱도 장난이 지지풍부 중에 봐. 리지털 롱. 지지풍부 중에 지지털은 간지 신의 소리하지. 풍부 된지 가서 우리가 얘가 디시도 아니 가사가 당시 연구했어. 제가 가다 가사가 다음에 쏙 떠와라. 아니 취다음에 또 그랬어. 아주 숨겨야래. 풍부 된지기 이 신의 순충을 고르했어.
So here, Tsongkhapa cites from Nagarjuna's precious garland, where Nagarjuna states that so long as grasping at the aggregates remain, they will be grasping at self, present. So Nagarjuna says that in order for someone to realize the selflessness of person completely or in its entirety, one also needs to overcome grasping at true existence of true existence of the aggregates as well.
Yeah, that's much. In some data, that the corner down over Murla, Rebecca, and Merson. Think of what the Tana Kankasheva, Chevatel, and the Dow Julius. Chenita, Rebecca, and Nursing Gunze, Kazan Murmurs among Shenuka, Rangaluji, Kazan Merzibil Solos.
So then the second, which is the actual presentation of the ultimate reality, this Tsongkhapa explains in terms of three main subheadings: identifying the object of negation of the reason, and what method should one adopt, whether by means of consequential reasoning or a syllogism, and the manner in which the view arises in one on the basis of that method. And then the first one is explained further in terms of three outlines: why the object of negation must be carefully identified, refuting other systems that refute without identifying the object of to be negated, and how our system identifies the object of negation.
십계배 나라야 시베사도 남시 유능대 주로 유로 담에 토는 시베사도 가고 있어요. 그래서 소인 거예요. 제가다 다유 다도 집어대 시버코알 기 가서다 되게 라뉴라고 차단해야다. 들들 내서 지금 미빈도 전에 다 되게 다도 집어대 세고 그래서 다도 집어 세단데 딱도 중요하게 진단이 다 세야지
타야도야 매버지 방내버냐나 다도 집에로도 가루고요. 곡도 dim마도 신시야 매버래. 자들이 전에 다도 짐베 로티기 지들 수에 진당이 다 써야 돼. 개디야나 되지 요구 그래스. 다른 아주 로 냠용도 되니 당진이 르 송단디 당 못쳐시고요.
So, with respect to this, Aryadeva states in the 400 stanzas on the middle way, where he says that the seed of cyclic existence lies in consciousness, and the objects are the sphere of experience, field of experience of this consciousness. Therefore, when one sees absence of selfhood in these objects, then the seed of cyclic existence will come to an end. So here, what Aryadeva is pointing out is that the seed of cyclic existence really is the grasping at self. So in order to bring about an end to this cyclic existence, we need to find a way of eradicating that seed, which is the root, and this can only be done by finding a way to bring about within ourselves a genuine understanding that the self, the content of this grasping, which is the self, does not really exist. So our self-grasping grasps at self, and what we call self, and whether or not that exists, will have implications. So we need to apply critical reasoning to try to flesh out if self as we tend to grasp to be existent were to exist, how would it look like? What would be the implications? So in this manner, when you so the key point here is to really understand the manner in which we tend to grasp at this notion of self. And by analyzing this, we need to demonstrate that the self as we grasp it does not really exist. And this understanding of the total non-existence of this self that is the object of our grasping needs to be internalized, and that conviction, that ascertainment can then help us eliminate that grasping. So that's the only way that possible.
다 뭐나 나오 냠베 로티 시르샤니 디가나 이니 나 스런데 바 로바직 숙천보로 차윤데 아니 나오 냠베 로텔라 나 사지 숙숙이 로리야 샤리고도 와 지나는 거 저 카나 가이는 거 로리 샤윤데 된진 거는 이거 로리 샤고도 와 다 안데 나오냐면 로티기 미버 나sam지 예버체 디매버 말이 쓰고 말이 다 겨운 것이 되지 다도 현실 세대야 참으로 디간에 삼다 그래 나한테 예버다 다 이네 로리야 다 나오냐면 로베 담보를 차이는 자네 나한테 아니 류심 니기 땡네 지 르파 딱삼지 나와 땡네 좋아 거라 나슬로디 거라 지 유진네 예대버지 로리야 셔도가 다른 거 지난 쇼크들도 대변이네 다 르왕 예버지 미쳐와 되는 거는 예버지 로리 셔도가 나한테 각지대 모왕실 찰 미쳐서니 각자 차라 개발래 아니 각자 모왕실 미쳐 똑바로 샤야 지기 시루지기 샤다 루시다 안데 각자 모왕실 시루기다 각자 모왕실 샤인을 자네 그 완전 미기시에도 통일을 자네 되는 거는 예버지 방문에 프게도가 사무실 조조야도 와 서고 방문에 예버지 샤대도 다 방문에 예버지 샤대버 능신지 되는 내대요나 다 딱딱세시고요 다 능규체디 타녀들 대신은 누구주스디 다 최대기 착화가 되어야 돼. 다 독서 받자베는 이해하면 되지. 근데 리미도 전에 편en수 방문에 예대가 지글로 샤데야디 각세는 수입을 자자가 나서 나오냐면 로티 미국 나디 예세 이내 나디 나바 샤단디 전쟁면에 예버지로 샤데미지 자자 샤워다도 열에서 진행에 로티 각세집을 로입니다
So,
전쟁면에 예버지로 샤데 어나로 되게 진당 유디 나 담버주고 나 랑문에 예버지 르시안도와 나 랑문에 예버디 매버 다녀도 매버리 나 강남이네 나 랑문에 예버지 이야기 미국에 나디 예버리
So, if we were to try to relate this object of negation to our own personal experience, we need to examine how the notion of self tend to arise in us naturally. So, when we have the thought of I am, the thought that I am, which is a very natural sense of selfhood that we all possess, but if we examine this carefully, we will see that within our sense of self, there's a kind of a supposition, especially when the sense of self, manifests in a strong form. Underlying that, there is a kind of an assumption of a self that is somehow exists in between our body and mind, something separate and other, over and above this, and somehow this object of our sense of self that we call I, we assume that it has some kind of concrete reality that is somehow self-defining and self-sufficient. It has some kind of concrete reality. And not only is it the case in which we relate to our sense of self, but also, in fact, this is exactly the way in which we tend to relate to everything else. So when we perceive something externally, whether it is something out there, we tend to, relate to that object as if that object is existing in its own right out there where we see it, something that we can point our finger at, something that is occupying a locus in space. And however, when we talk about the grasping at self as being diluted, we need to understand that the basis upon which the grasping arises, which is the person, that we're not saying that does not exist. The person exists. The person, we speak about the previous existence of the person, the future rebirth of the person, and also on that basis we can also make distinctions between me and others, self and others. So the person as an individual does exist. So what is being negated is the way in which we tend to assume that person to exist. So it's a particular manner in which we assume that person to exist that is being negated. And here, our assumption is that the person exists as some kind of self-sufficient, discrete reality. And so, therefore, when we perceive everything, even at the visual sensory level, the perception of kind of discreteness, the perception of solid concrete reality is already there. Although some Madhyamaka masters contend that perception of true existence occurs only at the level of thought, not at the level of the senses, sensory experiences. But here, in the Chantakirti's line of thinking, where what is being negated is very subtle, even at the sensory perceptual level, the perception of inherent existence is already there. So based upon that perception, then we tend to follow after this with thought, grasping at. So we affirm our perception, and on the basis of that we view whatever we perceive to possess exactly the reality that we perceive in them. So in the case of a person, our own self, just as the self appears to us as possessing this inherent existence, we also affirm that perception and we grasp at it. And it is this grasping at inherent existence that is being negated, that needs to be negated, and also the content of that grasping at inherent existing self. That is what needs to be negated.
Yeah. There's a dimension sungji나 리스토가 니기 뇌의 생물 밀음유 교매 레벨 따다 랑고서 나와sam데 시들 된지체 가야면 로이 따봤어. 그래서 대신 당신 코와 양대서 추구로던 민기 탄예기 따고 잠래 덕신 남게 땡 랑기 여방 가양 마치소. 다 시작하다. 제가 대단나야 머리 니두기 대단나야 머리 니두기 방배 소수계 소주 뭐 강남 시들 된지 주버식 철수 랑리 롱엔데르 가정은 제시 대다 추별로 나와이 나서 되는 주베 가사 들은디 가서 참우이인데 로잉고 상만 매버 캐버 신도지 당연히 공단을 붙이기 다외 정신在此 많이 봐이 캐규라 많이 덕신 고민배 제기 민성 상마통 민성 태양 자식은 뇌민녀의 주의 전주교연 랑도군 제베 가사 제반나바타스 전배면 선배나 다 야야 야우도도 왔다 선배 제반나바타면 좋아 그래서 어디디 나 전진군의 여대가 샤돼야 돼 자네요 말이지 나다도 좋아요 말이지 간다 그게 민대 샥삼시레스 판문은 좀 해봐 충문은 민대 뻘삼시레스 레데 있는 안도 로래야 대달 뻘삼시 잡아 판문은 여봐 시작도 어떻게 가시는 소리지.
So with respect to this, there are some very powerful lines in 7 Dalai Lama's writing, in one of which he says that just as in a mind that is intoxicated with sleep, various events and objects arises in that dream, and just as they appear so real in that dream. However, the reality of what all the things that appear in the dream is that they cannot be demonstrated to be real; they are unreal. In the same manner, he says that in our everyday perceptions, when things appear to our mind, they appear to possess as if they possess inherent existence, just like as if our mind, our perceptions are intoxicated by this grasping at inherent existence. However, the perceptions that we have of things possessing objective existence is unfounded. And even though this is the case, Mari 대단하야 머리
니두기 박배스 소수계 소주몰 강남 시터 전기 주식 파류지 독삼천도와 또가 강남야 시터 전기 원내게 되지 강남 시터 전기 주식 철수 랑레 롱에 들었듯 그래서 다 대달 추별로 나와이 나서 되는 주베 들은디 각자 참우이인데 로이 뭐 상만 매버 캐버 신도지.
So he says that even though they do not possess any reality at all, but to the mind, the sixfold consciousness of ordinary sentient beings which are intoxicated by the deep sleep of delusion, each of these things appear as if each of them possess a self-defining reality of their own, as if existing in their own right objectively from outside. So he says that for the ordinary mind, when we perceive something outside, we perceive that phenomena as if existing right there from the side of the object itself. And so therefore he says that so this distorted perception, so the content of that distorted perception, which assumes that things to possess some kind of objective existence in their own right, and this is the subtle object of negation, and this must be negated without any residue, without leaving anything behind. And then similarly, Kungdang Rinpoche says in one of his writings,
다외 정시 사도 되게 되는 주세요. 되는 주거든 자는 누가 알았다. 다외 정시 자외시 많이 봐요. 캐교라스. 연나 녀거 봐라. 그다 연나 녀버 녀외 아니 수루 자네 많이 베서 캐버렸어. 질 많이 봤으면 게 캐버면 마셔. 연나 녀버 녀외 최근에 자네 많이 베서 캐버렸어. 자 이제 많이 다 남들이 보라고 남녀를 보라고 지기 제윤자네 되게 뭐냐 주여나 내고야 저다 되게 뭐냐 주여나 가서 그게 유진이 주여나 유진이 지들 주다 직도 도와 타대도 도와 편주 땐데 버려도가 댐버려도가 아니 남들 집에 있나 이깁다 속받아 되게 전에 봐 제윤자네 싸우는 이야기도 봐 세상가 연나 니 고야지래디 니 고야지가 딱 자는 많이 배치 리버티 캐버리스 리버티가 많이 받아 리버티 캐버니보디야 이와셔와 개쳐도 와 자산한테 다외를 실제에서 많이 봐야 캐규라스 많이 덕시 고민배 세전 최초다 대신에 탄연 도세 시디 캐버 말이스 많이 덕시 고민배 제기 민점 항을 통해서 민점 실리로 다 민광이 되었어요. 그 모두 샤가치 보이는데 민점이 받으면 와. 방문에 니야매체. 중문에 정식 시바의 샤네 만티체. 그래서 다 민점이 뒤파서 다. 다 민점 돼야 자식 그 민점 대관에 팬을 자식 다 대시간에 다 여대요. 다 민점 대야 자식을 녀미 녀에 주어이 있어 녀에 주도가 녀미 녀에 주어이 제로 껴요 랑도로 그 선배 잡아 나버타스
in Kungdang Rinpoche's writing, he says that through the cultivation of the view of emptiness, one seeks to understand the nature of things. However, in that process, one does not find inherent existence, and that not finding inherent existence through this process constitutes the negation of inherent existence. So generally, not finding something is not equivalent to negating something or finding its non-existence. But in the context where if it is something that when we search for it, it should be findable, yet when we search for it, if it cannot be found, then in such context, then non-observance or non-finding and finding its non-existence coincide. So in the case of inherent existence, if it is real, when we search for it, it should be findable. So when you, through emptiness reasoning, when you do not find it, you are negating the inherent existence. And then he says that, however, that does not reject, that does not imply the non-existence of the basis upon which you understand emptiness. So the designated bases are left untouched. And so the only reality that one can affirm in the aftermath is the nominal existence. So only mere label and mere designation. And it is on that level of nominal existence one should be able to accord all the functions of cause and effect and so on. And the fact that the functions operate and they exist and the relationships and functions still exist is something that will be affirmed through one's own personal experience of the world. And if one follows this line of processes, then Kongdang says that one has arrived at the right point. And so when talking about subjecting inherent existence to critical analysis and not finding it, and this process may involve the application of or employment of fivefold reasoning of identity, absence of identity, difference, basis, and the support and the supported, and inherent relations that we find in Nagarjuna's text. And if we add two more, the shape or configuration and the collection, then it becomes a sevenfold analysis. So when you subject person or self to this kind of fivefold or sevenfold analysis, and when you do not find that, because if, say, for example, person do exist objectively in its own right, then when you search for it, it should exist either as identical with the aggregates, or as separate, or as a support, or as a supported. However, when you search through such analysis, we do not find it, and that is an indication that the person do not exist objectively in its own right. So, and once objective existence becomes untenable, then the other option left is the subjective existence. And then the subjective existence also becomes a problem, because then you will have to identify the existence of something, in terms of one's own state of mind. So therefore, neither the subjective existence or objective existence becomes tenable. So the only alternative that is left is the nominal existence. So we accord existence to phenomena only in nominal terms.
가정 뭐무슨 뭐 고배 신루 가고라니 가정 문제 캡쳐 가고 가정 문제 캡총 가고 다 맞는지 뭐노 다 대미체버단 말이니 룩주 우면 투무이 비체주 까버단 말 너지 저거는 수용 미심버단 말 전다 되네마 디스구도와 나 지금 강연 다 가지고 캡쳐 왔어야 돼 가서 지금에네 영 공단음 시간도 소야 돼 너무 소리지 가서 직사는 같은 게면도 포유케는 술내배 랑르 없이 둔드지 그래 나도 원도 그래서 깨는 터시 내자데 캐시 깨와 예매라 탄협로에 나와니 취지전도 민주시 민주시 다와 지 렌제 준제로서 주사보로 있니 다 참여도 요말 까안다다 다디 시거다 어레 정신 매라 den시다 말에 den시 정신 매라 다 den시다 지 랑도다 렌데로서 매베 다 매버 태베 매매담 아니 마신도 다들 너무 좋던 중이시도 다들 가지 겹쳐서 딱 간다 지 가인의 비게 리베 자나 니아민도스 근데 인도 수능 남제 뭐 최상으로 리베 누구리 있다 리베 내버지 샤도 말이스 근데 인도 다시 지금 마다 맞아 냠가 샤삼시 레마도 아니 고라 대응을 내주 두대버지 다 다시 야마래 살다 참여도 야마래 다시 뒤에 건다 다가는 신기 아니 참여 두버서야지 저도 가오르샤스 아니 롱크급을 임비네 아니 어래 다 참여 고된데 아니 가서 정유를 밀로와 가서 그래다 밀로와서 그러잖아요 담바로 치라 거대들 아니 우마벨로서 참은 저도 말이 사로 되는면로 어다 디니 디리스 차다리스 아니 상당히한다 지금 랑도네 가야니 다 매념을 샤제 드리차리는 근데 디 그래서 우메 체주 무슨 사도 우마베 아니 선언도 이슈 처니 근데 달라도 조셔봐 과래 배나 이슈 처 조주자네 아니 동반이다 더 지지만하고 때나 보고래 동반이 사야 더 커라 근데 우마리 정시 우마사들이 우마사야디 탄이 쳐가지 레마도 매배 타통하지 우메다와 샤도 말에 아도 고불루루기 되기 간다 동반이 더 소인도 자네 애는 자시르고 쓰기 그래서 땡진적으로 좋아하고 되는 동반이도 샤스 동반이 사야기다 우마베 동반이 송대야 고아디 매바지 계제다 아지 그게 가시고 그게 다들 직전에 많이 봤어 근데 계시지 말이스 우마베 동반이 있을 때 그래서 쓰고서 보이나 땡진적으로 좋아하는 쓰여스 땡진적으로 좋아하는 송고야 알지 태양 돌아네 강시 깨는데 깨봐 대마지 달아 깨버려지 예만이지 깨나 라라 칸데 동버셔 저는 돈에 뒤숭이야래 난 너무 먼 아니야 즉뒤 대응도 하고 때는 딱와 균제도 쳐야지 또 숭대야래 저들이 이미 이르잖아요 우마베 롱루기 에는 동니 소연도 때는 딱와 되래 마도 매매 되 말이스 따뜻 소리 저들이 인도 고도로 뒤쇼데 땡제들 가지고 되네 동반이도 셔 되네 때는 딱와 돼스 동반이 있어야 되네 때는 딱와 된다래스 때는 딱 스르잖아 측디기 누버디 빼쳐버리셔 때는 스르도 샤나 라레바티 고도 사 샤나 라레바 인도자네 샤나 라레바 샤나 떠바다 샤나 마드베니부티 겨와리 겨나네 응응게리 진짜 인도 샤나 라레바 샤나 땜바지 인도 때미 라왕가 주베 매바티 고용비야리 때는 딱 스르도 때는 genshengji wangi 권에 주den의식이 이해되십니다. 때는 딱 실선에. 자, 때는 다고데 디니 우면 라미 놓스. 저다고 샤나 라레베 권에 주den의. 샤나 라레베 권에 이해되바. 디리집에 이르잖아요. 아니 때는 딱 맞춰해. 때는 중. 다한테 때는 중. 준제된 중세야 지다. 때는 딱 된 중세 니세. 다한테 때는 되고 뒤로 숨겨야래. 준제된 중세나 뒤지고래. 때는 딱 된 중세도 뒤지마저 시저 타다라도 참조하래. 다 때는 딱 왔다라. 지단배지로 유배 때는 딱 숨으래다. 다한테 때는 딱 투모임도 소유인데 아니 유딩의 주변 차 뒤서면 말아. 사람 민들어 때는 딱 여대봐. 다도 때는 딱 와서 참으들으시나.
So then Tsongkhapa identifies kind of incorrect ways of identifying the object of negation, which includes two ways. One is over-negation, and the other one is under-negation. And in the context of over-negation, there is quite a good summary presentation of this in one of Kung Tang's writings, where basically Kung Tang points out that there are those who, while upholding the middle way view of philosophy and emptiness, share with the Buddhist essentialist basically the premise that if things do not possess inherent existence, then they will not possess any existence at all. And for example, the whole the premise of the essentialist critique of Madhyamaka presented in the 24th chapter, where Buddhist essentialist leveled against Nagarjuna that the emptiness teaching implies a rejection or negation of the existence of the Four Noble Truths and so on. So what Kung Tang is pointing out is that those who uphold this position, that absence of inherent existence imply absence of any existence, share the same kind of views with the Buddhist essentialist, yet at the same time they maintain that they are upholding the teaching of emptiness. So here, so this would include particularly those who understand the Nagarjuna's tradition of the Madhyamaka school to be rejecting any notion of valid cognition of things, and so when they understand Nagarjuna's teaching that everything is kind of mere label, mere designation, and no degree of inherent existence can be accorded to things, they also assume this to mean that no existence can be accorded. So Kung Tang explains that for those who maintain this, for them there will be no differentiation between good and bad, right and wrong, and none of these distinctions can be maintained. And in a sense, one can understand this because when we define a perception to be valid, the one of the key criteria defining characteristic of a valid understanding is its non-deceptiveness, that it is non-deceptive in relation to its perception. So, and non-deceptiveness ties into the notion of a truth, something being true. So therefore, and these Madhyamaka interpreters reject the notion of this kind of truth in the Madhyamaka system, and therefore they reject any notion of valid cognition. And Kung Tang is saying that if you reject that notion of valid cognition, you will be basically sharing the same position with the essentialist, who maintain that if there is no inherent existence, then nothing will exist. And in that case, one will fall into the extreme of nihilism. And if that is the case, then one will not be upholding the true middle way, which Nagarjuna identifies with his emptiness. And in fact, emptiness is the natural kind of basic middle way of the ground, Shi, Uma. And the fact that emptiness is characterized as the middle way, it needs to be free from both the extremes of absolutism and extremes of non-existence or nihilism. And and here it is important to relate this to Nagarjuna's own explanation of the meaning of emptiness. For example, the one that I cited when he says that the essentialists do not understand the purpose of the teaching on emptiness, they do not understand what is emptiness, and they do not understand the meaning of emptiness. In that context, Nagarjuna explains that when I say something is empty, I do not mean emptiness to be equivalent to total non-existence, nor emptiness is equated with the unfindability of things when you search for it. However, the meaning of emptiness is dependent origination. And in fact, in fundamental wisdom of the middle way, Nagarjuna says that that which is dependently originated, that I describe as emptiness. So there he is equating emptiness with dependent origination and saying that the meaning of emptiness is dependent origination. And this is based upon the Buddha's own statement in a sutra where Buddha states that that which has arisen from conditions is devoid of arising, and this is such a thing is devoid of any intrinsic arising, and therefore that which is dependent upon, that which has arisen from conditions is presented to be empty. And so therefore Tsongkhapa equates the meaning of emptiness with dependent origination, and furthermore he then goes on in the fundamental wisdom of the middle way and this in turn is dependently designated, and this is the true middle way. So the expression he uses is dependently designated, and this is a very powerful expression because it is formed of two elements, dependent and designated. And dependence already conveys the idea that phenomena do not possess a status that is independent. As phenomena do not, therefore the phenomena are dependent, they are contingent upon others, they are dependent upon others. So therefore the expression, the dependence, already negates any notion of independent existence, any notion of inherent existence. And then the second element of the expression, designated, conveys the notion that it is not nothing, it is not non-existence, but there is an identity of something which is kind of, emergent from this dependent relation. So together, this expression, dependent designation, points towards the middle way. Therefore, Nagarjuna says that this is the true middle way.
Yeah. Day. Under the Lam Rim Chenmo, Ribujuwe Tsujedi Changling, the Shude Tayans, Tayang Gunzobe, Gunje Namji, Gundile, Payun, and Yimi in Jewu, didn't Dinju, Gunje in Java, and never Ding Tawan and Romba, Chiniba and never Tawa tongues. This way, this way. Until you under the Umechesu Merson says, Sakon Tare. Umechesu Merson, Sakon Tangunis and Ribujuwe Lumtachan. The Ribujuwe Sindi Magic Journey, Tishude Tayans, Tanisui. So that the Gunje Dendri said that. Gunje Denju, the never sooner. Tanya Gunje Tidelia, who has never near Chick. Tini Gunze the Chetty. That Gunje Dendri, Loma, the Gunze the Chetty, and a shall rally, but the true Yundu. Church Rango Oil to be Rashi, do some never ding, never Chido, never Tovala, never 30 days. Ding nigger manner, top the sheriff, nigger lam, chason, ning tawane, loba, mizume cherubs. Tedder and the Vukus Kuni Tobe do Lamkin name, Mishuko, she, Tawa Danan Bilsura, Ra, Leve, Tawa Danan Bilsuni, Tamata the Shebe, Dinil never, Dino, Sosha. Tishude, Din Umobo Kasashan, Sumoya, Gendu. Gawando, Tone, Mingo, Chen Mishiba, La, Tashin, Shindu Dachi, Namju and Debe, Tub Kebe, Tub Kebo, Umoba, Shiva days. No, this is about Zusuksha. The Dembani dog, Tola Keres, 개회 처음에 매바 땅 보내 개회 공부 타도고니 잘라잖아 랑게 때마다 신도 그거 매도 주고 개회 장배 넉시 나버로 다배 현대다 정신주 돈은 동분이 되는 댄지들 주면 되인기 전세배 누배 동배 오고배 되는 뭐이노 시 깨서 된배 양도 초고 자도.
So, continuing with the explanation that the meaning of emptiness is really to be understood in terms of the meaning of dependent origination. And within the dependent origination, as explained before, there are two levels. One is the dependent origination in terms of causes and conditions, and one is dependent origination in terms of dependent designation. And so Tsongkhapa explains, he writes on page 129, the final paragraph, in the middle of the final paragraph, he writes the following: this attainment, as explained earlier, is based on their having amassed along the path immeasurable collections of merit and sublime wisdom, collections within which method and wisdom are inseparable. That in turn definitely relies upon attaining certain knowledge of the diversity of phenomena. This profound knowledge understands that the relationship of cause and effect, conventional cause and effect, is such that specific beneficial and harmful effect arise from specific causes. So here Tsongkhapa is referring to the dependent origination in terms of cause and effects, and using that as the basis, one then arrives at the understanding of the second level, which is the dependent designation. And so he writes that at the same time, amassing the collection of wisdom and merit and wisdom also definitely relies on attaining certain knowledge of the real nature of phenomena. This means reaching a profound certainty that all phenomena lack even a particle of essential and intrinsic nature. Certain knowledge of both diversity and real nature is needed, because without them it is impossible to practice the whole path, both method and wisdom, from the depths of your heart. This is the key to the path that leads to the attainment of the two embodiments when the result is reached. Whether you get it right depends upon how you establish your philosophical view of the basic situation, how you establish your view of the ground of reality. The way to establish that view is to reach certain knowledge of the two truths as I have just explained them. Except for the Madhyamikas, other people do not understand how to explain these two truths as non-contradictory. They see them as a mass of contradictions. So he's talking about the cause and effect, dependent origination, and the dependent designation. However, the learned, those who are learned and who possess subtlety and wisdom and vast intelligence, experts known as the middle way followers, Madhyamikas, have used their mastery of techniques for knowing the true truths to establish them without even the slightest trace of contradiction. In this way, they reach the final meaning of what the Buddha has taught. This gives them a wonderful sense of respect for our teacher and his teaching. Out of that respect, they speak with utter sincerity, raising their voices again and again. You who are wise, the meaning of emptiness of inherent existence, is dependent origination. It does not mean that things do not exist. It does not mean that they are empty of the capacity to function.
Full stop.